Okay. Are we on? Oh, well, this is embarrassing then. Hi.
Get started.
Let's get started. Welcome to the 366th Harvard Commencement. I'm Diana Eck, and I'm here in a booth high above the Tercentenary Theater with Dan Schrag, professor of geology and the head of the Harvard University Center for the Environment. Dan, this is an environmentally questionable day. The umbrellas are going up and then coming down, which actually gives us some hope that there won't be a steady downpour. It's not the day that we had hoped for, but it is the day of a great rite of passage for all these students who are here with us.
You know, Diana, it's great to be here with you, and it is actually in some ways a beautiful day. As you recall, last couple of years have been brutally hot.
Very hot.
Watching all these poor students sweltering in their robes. So at least they'll stay cool today. It'll be a wonderful day.
If it rains,
and a little rain,
you know,
a little rain will not wash the joy away from all the parents and all the grandparents who are watching these wonderful graduates today. This is really an incredible day of celebration, both for Harvard and for all of the different people who helped these spectacular students get to this point in their careers. It's really a very special time.
It is wonderful. And you see all of the parents that have seated behind and around the assembled graduates. But the graduates themselves basically take up all of the Tercentenary Theater. They are from every one of the professional schools, the graduate schools. They have been making their entry now into their respective places in the Tercentenary Theater for a few minutes. They're getting their seats. And then at the very end of all of these processions, the undergraduates will enter into their seats. And then we will have really the kind of assemblage that is what Harvard University means. There are very few times, in fact, no other time, when the word Harvard as a whole includes all of the people who are assembled.
It is
here.
really spectacular to see everybody here together. And you know, one of the great things, Diana, about this ceremony, which the viewers on television don't see quite as much, you will see now pictures of the undergraduates lining up. It's really one of the great things as a faculty member. You process through the crowd of undergraduates. And so you get to see all the students who have taken your courses over the years, who have interacted with you over the years, and it's really one of the special things. It takes a little longer, therefore, for everybody to come take their seats because the undergraduates are not yet in the Tercentenary Theater, but it's a wonderful tradition.
The shots that you will see here we see some of the graduate school processing, but you will see the undergraduates lined up as we did just a moment ago in front of the John Harvard statue and all the way through the other part of Harvard Yard, which is the freshman yard, and they open their ranks to create a kind of processional aisle for the president's procession and for the faculty. And that will be the sort of conclusion as the president's procession moves through the open ranks of the undergraduates.
That's exactly right. And you see there everybody chattering, everybody excited. All of the different schools will get called on one at a time, all of the different students for the wide variety of degrees that Harvard offers. They're all here, they're all excited. It's really a wonderful celebration.
And we see, because this is a rite of passage, so to speak, that processions have a very important role in this. The graduate students processing into the Tercentenary Theater. And from the standpoint of the undergraduates, I'm one of the faculty deans of Lowell House, and so we have a procession, as all the houses do, from a very early breakfast, about 6:30 in the morning, to the senior chapel. And the senior chapel is sort of a version of the daily morning prayers that takes place here, but a much more ecumenical, in fact, multi-religious version. And they are crowded, the whole of the senior class, into senior chapel, and then take their places in these processional lines. And so they process behind, in the case of Lowell House, we came behind our bagpiper, and in the case of Leverett House, they came behind their Dixieland band. There are innumerable sort of musical forces that guide our students into the Tercentenary Theater on this wonderful morning. And
We're
we have
just
our
being
first
joined
guest.
by one of those graduating seniors, Justin Sass here. Justin, welcome. Are you having fun this morning?
Yeah, it's great to be here.
And where did you come from this morning? Where's your house?
I'm in Pforzheimer House.
Did you have some processional music that saw you down here?
Not too much. We went to the church,
To the chapel,
and we had a really excellent service. We sang Fair Harvard at the end, and then we were just lining up and watching all of the graduates of past classes go by.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Wonderful. That's great.
So Justin, you're a social studies concentrator,
that's right.
but I know you because you took my course last fall.
Right.
As a senior, which is kind of unusual to take a Gen Ed course in the fall.
That's
This is
correct.
a Gen Ed course on the Climate Energy Challenge.
Right. So I had done most of my general education requirements in earlier years, but had left my science requirements for later years. And I really wanted to find a science class that would give me a really useful piece of knowledge about the world. And my focus area is modern Middle East. And there had been a lot of talk in recent years about the potential effects, both in the past and going forward, of climate change on the Middle East. So I thought this is a really important topic to know more about.
That's wonderful.
It
Yeah.
sure is.
So tell us just a little bit about your senior thesis. You're working on the cause of the Syrian conflict.
That's correct. So I'm interested in tracing the economic roots of the Syrian civil war. So what I did was, on the one hand, I constructed a fairly complex political economic history of Syria, especially between 2000 and 2010. And then I used a couple hundred news sources to reconstruct day by day, event by event, the first 2 weeks of protests in Syria as part of the Arab Spring, where those protests took place, who was protesting, how large the protests were, what they were protesting, and then I connected the two. And what I discovered essentially was that about 80% of the first protests took place in locations that were the most impoverished locations before the Civil War. And most of the protesters were interested in protesting issues of corruption, issues of members of the government, members of the regime, taking more than their fair share.
Oh, that's very
What a
interesting.
wonderful project. I would love to see this.
Yeah,
So-
I'd love to share.
This is an important piece of work to do.
So after you graduate, are you thinking about traveling in the Middle East?
I am, in fact, yeah. I've begun to learn Arabic, but if I want to continue with Middle East studies, I think I need to become fluent as soon as possible, and the ideal way to do that would be to go travel in the region. Obviously, my research itself has been in Syria, which you can't go to Syria right
It's a
now.
little bit difficult to do
Yeah.
field work there right now.
But if I go to other countries in the Middle East, that might open up new research opportunities for other research projects, and also it would help me become fluent in Arabic, help me read more sources for my own research about the causes of the Civil War.
That's really exciting, Justin.
Congratulations to
Right.
you.
Thank you
Wonderful.
so
Look
much.
at those empty seats that your whole class is going to be occupying.
We're just
before
seeing
long.
now the Harvard Corporation beginning to start the procession. There's Nan Cohane. This is her last year on the Harvard Corporation. A special honor for her. And we saw Larry Bacow and a number of other of the Harvard Corporation members. Here are the Board of Overseers. You see they're wearing their elegant hats. And then just after the corporation and the Board of Overseers, we will see the faculty beginning to come in. Justin,
Actually, see some
congratulations. You need to get back to your class.
Thank you so much.
I hope you have a great day
Will do.
and enjoy the ceremony.
Right,
Good.
thank you so much.
Thank
Take care.
you. Congratulations, Justin. I think we even saw some members of the Cambridge City Council who were coming through the procession there, and we will have the entire president's procession led by the sheriff of Middlesex County.
That's right. I saw him earlier milling around. He's all ready. You see there those robes. They may look pink to you, but in fact, we call them crimson. They look a little pink, but they are the students who've gotten the PhD, the highest degree that Harvard offers.
What you will see as we begin offering the degrees is that the PhDs are awarded first by the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences and the Dean of the Graduate School. And then at the very end of the awarding of degrees will be the, in a sense, the pride of place of the undergraduates who will be given their degrees together.
You know, we have some special undergraduates this year. Obviously, amidst this huge number of students, every one of them has a story to tell. There are stories of all sorts, but there are some special students who are actually children of some of our colleagues this year. Our provost, Alan Garber, his son Ben Garber is graduating today.
He's in Dunster House, I think, yeah.
Nitin Noria, the dean of the business school, his daughter Reva is graduating today.
I know Reva. She was actually a researcher before she started school here for the Pluralism Project one summer.
That's wonderful.
Wonderful student, yeah.
Jeremy Bloxham, my colleague in Earth and Planetary Sciences, and now the Dean of Science, his son William is graduating from Forsheimer House, and he's in the undergraduate class. And Nick Cashin is graduating as well. He was a sociology concentrator, and he's the son of Bob Cashin, who is at our development office and is a wonderful man. Naomi Oreski is a colleague of ours from History of Science. Her daughter Hannah Belitz is graduating from the law school with a JD today. And David Bloom, our colleague at the School of Public Health, a distinguished economist who works on really global development and international development. His daughter, Sonali Bloom, is graduating from the business school with an MBA. Those are just some small number of the thousands of people getting degrees today.
And from Lowell House, we have, 100 and some Rhodes Scholars, students who are going on Fulbrights to every part of the world. And this is really a transition from the life that they've known here for the last 4 years.
That's exactly right.
All the new things that they're going to undertake.
You know, this really is a commencement. They call it a commencement, and that's a great term for it because, you know, a Harvard degree is certainly not the end. It may be the end of their time at Harvard, but it's a beginning. It really is a launching out on their career, and that's what makes this process so exciting. You see these students and you think about the impact that all of these great minds are going to have, all of the hard work that they put in to get to this point, and then just imagine the things they're going to do over the next many decades. It's really extraordinary. These students will truly change the world around us.
This is called an academic festival, and indeed it is a great academic festival, even on a rainy day like this. A sense of all of the sort of pomp and circumstance, but also the festivity of the luncheons, the spreads, they're called.
Oh, there's the High Sheriff of Middlesex County.
Where is the High Sheriff? Oh, there he is.
He's walking through,
right
very
there.
tall man with a top hat. And there's President Faust, Drew Faust, our president, and she is processing in with the sheriff.
And with Jackie O'Neill, whose back is toward us now, and he will the University Marshal.
A few people back, you can see Alan Garber. As I said, his son Ben Garber is graduating today. And you see the members of the corporation just behind. Larry Bacow, the former president of Tufts University, former provost at MIT. He is coming in as well.
President and Fellows Division. And one of the things that rituals like this do is to act out the nature of our community, and actually in the processions see a little bit of the hierarchy of the community. The president's procession followed by the professors, and then eventually the undergraduates and the students.
Yeah. All of these people have contributed so much to this institution, helping shape it and guide it. The corporation in particular has been very, very important. And here is Drew applauding the students as he walks through into the Tercentenary Theater.
This is her 10th year as president, and she, as is customary, delivers a baccalaureate address on the day before commencement. And yesterday, her baccalaureate was extremely interesting.
There you see members of the faculty
There
walking
they are.
in. There's Melissa Franklin, a professor of physics, hugging one of her undergraduate students. As I said, it's a wonderful experience to have the faculty walk through the crowd of undergraduates on their way in. It's a great tradition.
One of the things that Drew Faust said yesterday was that she wanted students to embrace the value of noticing, not just being noticed, but seeing, active seeing, rather than focusing on being seen. And connecting, as she said, connecting your mind and awareness to something beyond yourself. That's an extraordinary message, and it also went together with the Phi Beta Kappa oration of Sherry Turkle yesterday.
There you see Jonathan Zittrain from the law school.
And Robin Kelsey, the new
Robin
Dean
Kelsey,
of
Dean of
the
Humanities.
Humanities.
He's an art historian, a historian of photography.
And if you can recognize them, you see the honorams and their escorts. We probably shouldn't tell you who they are, but you will recognize some of them, to be sure.
In a minute, you'll see the deans coming in. There again is Nan Cohen in the black hat. Nan Cohen has served on the corporation for many years. She was the former president of Wellesley and the president of Duke.
Yeah.
Here people are filing in. Now you see the deans. There's Peter Bohl, who's an associate provost and a historian of China. There you see Frank Doyle in the Princeton robe, blue with the orange trim.
Yeah.
Frank is the dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Next to him, Mike Smith, who's the dean of Arts and Sciences in the Harvard robe with the black hat. Mike, a computer scientist, has now been dean.
Jonathan Walton, who is greeting people on both sides of the aisle as he comes down. He is the QC minister in the Memorial Church.
That's right. And all of the other deans are filing in. Hunt Lambert is there. You can see Hunt. He's the dean of our Dean of Continuing Education and University Extension. The Extension School, a very important part of the university, and Hunt has really done extraordinary things with that program. And you see the faculty following up soon behind. It's a wonderful procession.
There are new deans this year as well.
There's Michelle Williams. Michelle is the new dean of the School of Public Health.
Yeah.
And Michelle's a distinguished scholar of public health. Really a wonderful addition to our administration.
And there are new deans who may not be right here.
You see Nitin Noria there on the left?
Noria,
he's the dean of the business school.
Followed by David Hempton in blue, who's the dean of the School of Divinity.
That's right. Hunt Lambert passing, and others slowly filing in. I think there are some parents mixed in with the procession.
I think we also might mention, certainly from the standpoint of the college, our new Dean of Students this year, Katie O'Dare, who has done just a wonderful job stepping into the role of Dean of Students in one of the most challenging years for Harvard College. Now you begin to see the students themselves in procession, the ones who will take their places in the Tercentenary Theater. People ask who's speaking at Harvard Commencement, and there have been a number of wonderful speakers. I mentioned Sherry Turkle, who was the Phi Beta Kappa orator yesterday, and talked about how technology makes us forget what we know about life, and is always encouraging students to put away your phone and have a real conversation, a message that is somehow echoed by Drew Faust's message on noticing.
We just saw a quick picture of Shirley Tillman across the way.
Wonderful.
Shirley is also on the corporation and a former president of Princeton University.
if we were to go on with the people who are speaking and who have spoken, the Class Day speaker, of course, yesterday for our undergraduates was Joe Biden.
Vice
And that was an
President Joe Biden. Extraordinary speech. Really a call to action. Joe Biden's been a senator for 36 years and then vice president for 8 years. A man, he joked at the beginning of his speech that he was the vice president that had the fewest assets of any in history. You know, such a long, distinguished career of service that where his rewards are not financial, but really in so many ways he has helped the lives of so many Americans.
Well, and it was really a challenge to our students to say somehow 9% of you were considering a job in public service, and that has to change.
That's right.
He spoke of his own generation and the challenges that were faced by the assassination of Martin Luther King and of Robert Kennedy and the challenge of rebuilding America in the wake of the Vietnam War. And he said this is the magnitude of challenge that students have today. I might also mention that former Assistant Attorney General Sally Yates spoke at Harvard Law School yesterday, and at the Kennedy School's Class Day was John Kerry. Today we also will have a speech, the one major speech this afternoon, aside from the President's remarks, which are important. We'll have a speech by Mark Zuckerberg, who is the one honorary degree candidate that everyone knows about. I might mention that Mark left Harvard, as everyone knows, after his sophomore year. His girlfriend, then girlfriend, Priscilla Chan, was a student in Lowell House and went on to become a pediatrician in the Bay Area, and still is. But along with Mark is the founder of the Chan Zuckerberg initiatives that really are aimed at making a difference in the lives of the next generation in education and in health. And Priscilla was a Lowell House student and was kind enough to come back and talk with some of our own.
There's
Lowell
Martha Minow giving someone a high five.
High five to Rakesh Khurana.
Oh, that's Rakesh, yes. I didn't see it from the back of his head.
So Priscilla came and talked to at coffee with some of our Lowell House seniors who are going into medicine.
Yeah.
And that was just a wonderful
See a
morning.
picture there on the left. Diane Paulus, the artistic director of our American Repertory Theater here in Cambridge. She's up there on the stage.
I might also mention that the baccalaureate that took place yesterday is now we begin to see some of the honorands appearing. Among them, well, we can't really mention, but we can talk about their escorts in any case. But the baccalaureate is very interesting. It included readings and prayers from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Guru Granth Sahib of the Sikhs, from the Tenrikyo scriptures of Buddhists, from, of course, from the Quran, from the Bible, from the Hebrew Bible, and a prayer in the Navajo language. But something that really represents the breadth of the cultural and religious traditions of Harvard College in this day and age. A real richness of diversity.
There are some of the undergraduates from Quincy House. The faculty are continuing to process in.
The alumni classes do come this morning as well, in addition to their appearance
That's right.
this afternoon.
The major reunions, the 25th and the 50th, march after the faculty. And
the chief marshal of the alumni this year, of the 25th, is our own Attorney General, Maura Healey, from Massachusetts, who is in the 25th reunion class.
My brother, Jonathan Schrag, is actually in the 25th reunion class
as well. Congratulations.
Which is a very nice thing. My mother, it's her 55th reunion, so it's Minna Schrag. It's a nice to celebrate with them.
Well, in the 50th reunion class is what they sometimes call the Evergreen Dean, Tom Dingman, who is the Dean of Freshmen now. And also John Lithgow, who received the Arts Medal.
That's right, who received the Arts Medal just a couple of years ago.
he and who really is in charge of and launched our Arts First ceremony. So John is also in the 50th reunion class, and I think I saw him. He may well be an escort, but in any case, he is here at the ceremonies today. The honorary degree candidates are welcomed on the night before commencement at a gala dinner in Annenberg Hall, in which there are people from across the university, and in which the honorary degree candidates are recognized individually by the president and then by the assembled Harvardiana from everywhere. I see some of our own religion PhDs there, and we have quite a few of them. We have about 10 PhDs.
Really? That's
this
a big
year.
number this year.
It is a big number. Doing everything from working on issues of Muslim relations in France to biblical studies.
You see there in the University of California Road, Professor Jonathan Lossos. Jonathan is a professor in OEB. He studies lizards, and his father is in the 65th reunion class.
It's
Joseph
amazing.
Lossos, class of 1952.
I mean, one of the things people say is that you see the whole life cycle pass before you here. So it is, in that sense, an event of the life cycle. In the white hood there is Tom Kelly.
Tom Kelly, our
professor of music.
There's Alan Garber, our provost, on the stage.
The faculty will stay dry today. There is no rain plan, really, if it starts to rain heavily, for the undergraduates. And I might recall that this whole space is called the Tercentenary Theater because it was constructed as such, really, for the Harvard 300th anniversary in 1936. And at that event, there were people literally from all the great universities of the world. And it rained like mad. And I think someone, perhaps President Roosevelt, was heard to say, "This is how Harvard soaks the rich." And it was in just a downpour. And
it's really not so bad today.
It's not so bad today. And there is no option, really. If you can imagine the 10,000 people who are assembled in the Tercentenary Theater and around its fringes, there is no option. There's no indoor space, although there are the many public halls in the Science Center and in all of the houses and in Sanders Theater, where people can watch these proceedings and listen to us and have a pretty good view of what's going on.
Well, nobody's going to get sunburned today, I think.
No, and we have the best seats in the house, Dan.
That's right.
I mean, we're dry. We can see everything on the monitor, and we can see it all live, too. It's wonderful. There you see Sid Verba, one of the great professors in the Department of Economics. And some of my divinity school colleagues in front. Hey, Chris. Getting all the faculty on the stage is a bit of a challenge, and you can see that every once in a while our university marshal, Jackie O'Neill, is sort of beckoning people to move a little faster. But there really is no hurry on a day like today. It is a day once in a lifetime. And for faculty and students alike, this is a matchless experience. There's Christoph Wolff, famous scholar of Bach and member of the music department.
Martha Minnows talking to Nitin Noria, the Dean of the Law School and the Dean of the Business School. Of course, this is Martha's last year as Dean. She's stepping down from her work at the law school and back to research.
Back to research and teaching.
She has really done a spectacular job at the law school through a very difficult time, a time of upheaval, discussion about race and about politics. And I think she's steered us through that time very, very ably.
And that discussion, of course, has taken place across the college this year as well. A lot of economic issues and race and cultural issues. The class that is graduating today began their senior year with the strike of the dining hall workers. And all of them had to pull together in new ways to begin to take up some of the responsibility of creating community with the dining hall on strike. And of course, the dining halls are part of our family, really, at the Harvard houses.
Absolutely. Here, the faculty continue to walk in.
There's Warren Goldfarb, a professor of philosophy.
I see Richard Lazarus there in the middle. Richard is a distinguished environmental law professor and also an expert on the Supreme Court at the law school. Standing there talking with Mark Wu. Mark Wu is another faculty member in the law school.
And here
they're congratulating the law school graduates today.
A festival of umbrellas, really. It's a good thing that Dan and I are together. I know some of the people on the faculty, and he knows a lot of the people I don't know.
We complement each other well.
We do. One of the things to remember is that there is a lot of tradition once this program begins. There are two pieces of music that are always sung, and that includes Gounod's Domine Salvum Fac right at the beginning, and Psalm 79, Give Ear, My Children, to my law, and that also is sung in St. Martin's tune at every commencement. But this commencement, there is also a premiere, a world premiere, of a piece called To the River Charles. And that will be the first time this piece by Michael Schachter is performed. There is a commencement choir that consists of students who are chorally minded and who stay, not usually members of the senior class, but freshmen, sophomores, and juniors who stay to sing. And also a commencement band.
And of course we'll have the Latin address and the English address, both by one of the members of the college and then one of the members from the graduate school. And this year it'll be somebody from the Divinity School.
Yes, I'm quite excited to hear that. The members of the graduate school as well as the undergraduates compete very fiercely for these roles in singing.
And of course, when it's time for the Latin oration, the students actually have a translation, so they know when to laugh at all of the jokes. Unfortunately, members of the audience aren't quite so lucky, so they may not understand what's going on.
There are timelines of this year in all of the newspapers of the day, but as I think about our own personal timeline, very early in the fall, we were lucky to have an address by Aung San Suu Kyi from Myanmar. And that was very widely attended, and she was then hosted for a dinner in Lowell House. It was a great
So Lowell
honor.
House is, in your role as faculty dean, Lowell House is about to go through a time of upheaval.
Oh,
There's
we
a
sure are.
house renewal, which is a wonderful thing. Renewal is a good thing.
It is.
And Harvard is spending a lot of money to upgrade and renew the houses, completely renovate them. But of course, it means you are going to be displaced for the next year and a half or so.
We invited all of our seniors and their parents for the usual reception in the faculty dean's residence last evening. We'll have our senior common room for a luncheon of poached salmon in our residence this noon, and then have the awarding of the degrees, of the diplomas. But
you see there,
tomorrow,
Bill. Oh, go ahead.
Tomorrow we will be thrown out, basically. The moving van will come up and completely displace the first floor of the faculty dean's residence and begin the process of taking apart
you see
the
Bill
dining
Fash
hall.
from Archaeology there, and Jeremy Bloxham, our Dean of Science, John Shaw, the Chair of Earth and Planetary Sciences.
So it's a very bittersweet time at Lowell House. I mean, the courtyards, the public rooms, the student rooms, all undergoing a considerable renovation. And And then we'll be away for 2 years with the...
So 2 years is quite a long time.
It is.
How do you think about holding your community together, making it still feel like... Well, I mean, one of the special things at Harvard is the house system, where it takes this huge community and creates small, more manageable communities within it.
Well,
How do you maintain that kind of sense of family during a time when you're no longer living together?
We've been thinking about this for a couple of years in anticipation of this. And we do have a lot of traditions. We have a lot of people who are committed to this, both tutors and members of the Senior Common Room, and of course we ourselves. It's one of the reasons that Dorothy and I are staying on as faculty deans, because we have been pretty effective at creating a sense of community there. And we have a lot of people on board to do it. So
we just saw the very end of the procession. There's John Shaw walking to his place.
And the marshals will come and tell the chief marshal that the
Dimitar Saslov from astronomy.
That everyone has been seated. And we have Ben Levy from Lowell House, who is one of the marshals who is charged with seating the undergraduates. This is a considerable task, as you might imagine.
So the undergraduates are still filing in, but in another few minutes, everybody will be in their places and ready to go. Look at the faces of one of the happy undergraduates.
For those of you who remember Cambridge or know Cambridge from a few years ago, the heart of the community in the course of house renewal will be what was formerly the Inn at Harvard, at the corner of Harvard and Harvard Street and
So
Mass
most of
Ave.
your students will live there?
No, not most. The sophomores will live there. We'll have our house offices there and our common rooms. We'll have our weekly teas there and our high tables and, major dinners, etc. The students who are juniors and seniors have apartments up and down Prescott Street and above J.P. Lick's on Mass Ave and above the Grolier bookstore. That's Jackie O'Neill, the University Marshal.
Jackie O'Neill's talking to people on the stage, getting ready to start the ceremony, where she will introduce the Sheriff of Middlesex County, who will call the meeting to order.
Talking to the General Counsel of the University. The hats, wow. In place of top hats, the women of the corporation and of the overseers have quite a lot of latitude.
They get to wear a lot of interesting style. The Queen of England would be jealous.
I think it's important to know that as the conferring of degrees begins, they are conferred by what is called a speech act of the president. In other words, the whole group stands up together, and the president, having been introduced to this group by the respective dean of the school, confers upon them the degree which they are qualified.
And then each undergraduate house has their own ceremony where individually their names get called out. And the same with each of the schools. So later this afternoon, I will be putting the new PhDs in the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. And that gets done individually after the degrees are conferred by the president en masse.
And it was the case for many years that you had to buy your diploma if you wanted a diploma. The diploma was extra.
No longer.
No longer. Well, you still have to pay for it, but in a much longer way. So, yes, the ritual conferring of the degrees, and I will say this conferring of degrees is one of the oldest secular rituals in the United States, going on now for some 300 plus years. And toward the end of the whole ceremony, when the meeting is adjourned by the sheriff, there will also be this ceremonial ringing of bells all around Cambridge, including the bell of the first parish across Mass Ave, the first Unitarian parish, which rang during the very early Harvard commencements as well.
I think we're almost ready to start. There you see Jonathan Zittrain, our colleague from the law school, talking to Mark Zuckerberg, who will be our commencement speaker later in the day.
Everyone on the platform is dry, and under this canopy of trees, they do provide a bit of protection. One of the things that we learn is that it was 70 years ago at commencement that Secretary of State George Marshall spoke and described what became the Marshall Plan.
That's right. You
There have
see
been
some of the
great
honorary
speakers.
degrees up there. You could see the man sitting down there. He may be recognized by everybody. James
Yes.
Earl Jones, the great actor.
Yes?
He recently appeared at the ART at a beautiful presentation of The Night of the Iguana, Tennessee Williams play,
Yes.
along with Amanda Plummer, Christopher Plummer's daughter.
Extraordinary.
People have their rain ponchos on. They're ready to go.
At 9:45, we should have the ceremony beginning with the ringing of the bell, and by 11:30, it should be ending. We're on air pretty much throughout this time, but we'll be rather silent as the ritual proceeds because it has its own sort of ritual dimensions that are carefully scripted by the marshal of the university. Amazing to see that aisle cleared now, and there's Rakesh Khurana and Nitin Noria from the business school.
Jackie O'Neill will begin the day. People are almost there.
Presumably graduates of the medical school.
Yes, wearing their stethoscopes. Every school likes to have some representation of their particular special approach to the world.
So the meeting, and this is described as a meeting, will be called to order by Peter Kotujian, the sheriff of Middlesex County. And
he has quite a flair for
Yes.
Calling the meeting to order.
I think his gold-tipped baton must belong to the university. I don't think it is usual within his...
Yes, but he seems to know how to use it.
He knows how to use it, yes. Then there will be a chaplain of the day to introduce the proceedings with a brief prayer. Alanna Copenhaver Sullivan today. And that has become rather a role that rotates. We have had Muslim chaplains introduce the ceremonies as well. And
the rain's coming down a little bit harder right now, but it may lighten up in a little bit.
Undergraduates were told they cannot bring umbrellas, and so there they are.
They're hardy.
They are, and it's a great day for them. It doesn't matter.
Very soon, the people on stage, the corporation members, the Board of Overseers, the deans, the faculty who are accompanying the honorary degree recipients, and the honorary degree recipients themselves, they'll all take their seats, and Jackie O'Neill will step up as University Marshal, and the ceremony will begin.
The man in the red and blue is Richard Tarrant, professor of classics. And he is the one who runs the competition for the orations. And you can imagine it is not everyone who feels comfortable speaking before 10,000 people. Without notes, by the way. These are memorized.
There is James Earl Jones. You may recognize standing right beside him is Henry Louis Gates, Skip Gates.
There's one other very recognizable honorand, but now I am not seeing her.
I don't see her.
She is an actress.
She is a wonderful actress. I actually was with her when she received an honorary degree years ago from Trinity College
Wonderful.
in Ireland.
What a sight. The
Actually, you know, with the
Centenary
rain,
Theater
the light
just-
is quite beautiful.
It is beautiful.
It's soft, and the final wave of undergraduates are coming into the theater. They're coming in to take their seats, but we see the very end there. I think those last handful of undergraduates are now about to come down the middle aisle, and then we'll be ready to begin. Alan Garber is standing there, our provost, talking to Jackie O'Neill.
I think we should recognize the fact that this year we have a new sort of person who runs the whole of the commencement, Stephen Magro, and he has done a wonderful job. This is, as you might imagine, an enormously complex staging event. And the processional order and the lines and the script for what happens is
and it's actually a hard job. You know,
it's a
Grace
very hard
ran
job.
this for how many years?
For many years, a couple of decades.
For
I
more
think.
than 2 decades. And so for Stephen to come in and take this over and learn all of the traditions and all of the customs, it's really a great challenge. He's done a wonderful job. There you see Mark Zuckerberg and James Earl Jones.
And there are others here whom people will recognize immediately for the impact of their work and for the impact of their music. The marshals are what we would generally call the ushers at this event, and
people are
they
taking
are
their
fairly
seats,
well trained.
and it looks like we are about ready to begin. There is,
well, one of the great surprises. Everyone who has the program will notice, but it is John Williams.
that's
the
right,
great composer.
John
and
Williams, the
conductor.
great composer. I wonder if we'll hear a little Star Wars from the band today. Although he's created so many iconic musical scores for great movies.
Among the bells that will toll at the end of this ceremony is the 17-bell swan of Lowell House. Bells that were newly cast in 2007, blessed in Russia, shipped to the United States, and then we shipped the old, really historic Lowell House bells back to their home, their monastery in Russia. And that year of the bell exchange was one of the best and most interesting years in our time as house deans.
There you see Drew Faust in her throne. It's a chair. It's not the most comfortable chair, I think, in the world, but she doesn't have to sit there too long, just for a few hours today. And she will stay seated throughout most of the day. Here you see all of our honorary degree recipients. On the left,
There
you might
she
notice,
is.
there
You
she
might
is,
notice.
Dame Judi Dench.
Yes.
Spectacular actress. Sitting next to our distinguished professor of computer science, emeritus now, Michael Rabin, wonderful colleague in School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. He is also receiving an honorary degree. It's a nice tradition that Harvard has that usually, not every year, but almost every year, there is one member of the Harvard faculty, usually an emeritus or emerita, member of the Harvard faculty who receives an honorary degree. It's a very nice way of honoring their service and their impact.
Yes.
Okay, we're waiting for the very last students to come in, but we can see the very end of it.
We've said that before.
I know. It's a little slow this year. I wonder what's slowing it down, but the ceremony will begin shortly.
I think it almost is, because we're just about to see Ben Levy come down the aisle and tell Jackie O'Neill that everyone's seated. And if getting into the Tercentenary Theater is complex, getting out is also complex. And there is the President's procession that will retire, will leave the stage and go down the processional center aisle. After that, it's sheer chaos. There's the bell.
And now the ceremony begins.
Mr. Sheriff, pray, give us order.
Oh, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay.
As the High Sheriff of Middlesex County, I declare that the meeting will be in order.
Please rise for the national anthem and remain standing for the chaplain of the day, who will open the exercises with a prayer.
Let us pray. Holy God, known by many names, we gather today brimming with joy and overflowing with gratitude. We give thanks for these candidates, for their families, friends, communities, and educators who have given them roots to ground them and the support to reach for the sky. We ask your blessing upon them at this moment. Grant them imaginations to envision new ways of how the world might be. Grant them wisdom from ancestors, known and unknown. Grant them ceaseless curiosity about creation and humankind. Grant them conviction for justice and commitment to equity. Grant them attentiveness to the gifts and needs of those around, whether they be loved ones or strangers. May they build lives where their deep gladness meets the world's deep need. God, you have called us to ventures of which we cannot see the ending, by paths yet untrodden. Give us faith to go out with good courage, not knowing where we go, but with the confidence and knowledge of where we have been. Fill us with purpose and joy, so that we might go out to better serve this world, to be harbingers of hope, seekers of justice, cultivators of compassion, architects of beauty, givers of light, and bearers of love. Amen. You may be seated.
Latin salutatory, ipos imperfectum, candidate for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, Jessica Rachel Glick.
Says Faust, Decani illustres, Professore sapientissimi et familiae delectissimi, et vos, carissimi sodales, salvete omnes! In hoc teatro sedentes, dum reputamus omnes priores Harvardianos, cogitare Paulum de rebus antiquis nos apportet. Fortasse, vel in otio, vel neg otio. Opera poetarum veterum legistis, de itinere Odyssei, aut de proiliis in urbe Troia. Hae fabulae longe remotae et spatio et tempore videri possunt. Sed nosmet ipsi hodie, ut tempora dulcia in hac universitate minimus, hiscere epos Harvardianum nervis nostris possumus. Arma virosque conimus, qui primi longas per noctes cum scientia computatoris quinquagenta, vel scribendo expositoris, vel economicis decem certa verunt, qui postea iactati maximis laboribus, theses difficilima superaverunt. Clarorum illorum animorum, qui ad litera lamonstrorum pervenerunt, et quorum non nulli in lamonstra ipsi mutati sunt, numquam obliviscemur, nec obliviscemur illorum summae fortitudinis qui ad tartaream terram, id est ad inferam partem institutionis scientiae discendere ausi sunt, ibi explicationes oraculorum scilicet arcanorum verborum professorum petiverunt, eventus eorum varii conatus tamen egregii erant. Sed non solum validos in mente laudamus, sunt etiam illi in corpore validi lusoris nostri petifolis. Ut in Troia o Limacaici sic in hoc anno Elienses indigne illos vicerunt, sed saepissime nostri athletai triumphaverunt. Haec magna fecimus, non singuli, sed communiter. Amicos fidos habebamus, qui stabant nobiscum tam per adversitates, quam per laetitias. Haec res apta materia est libro epico. Nam quamquam tanti libri heroes habent, revera historiae populorum sunt. Ilias Homeri scilicet ex oribus multorum Graecorum nata est. Sic epos nostrum fabulam communem narrat. Interim, cum lauri merebantur abduris Harvardianis, forsitan arsimus, cum aliquo amore, ut Aeneas et Odysseus quondam arserunt. Forte circem quandam novam in convivio in venibus. Aut forte volumen quodam, vel sententiam, vel linguam amare coepimus. Hae deliciae semper comites erant, cor calefactantes in hiemibus frigidis cantabrigiensibus, cum sub pondere officiorum laboravimus, spem ac gaudium in amplexibus earum experti sumus. Necesse erat Aeneae relinquere suam pulcherimam reginam, ut Italiam peteret. Nos tamen transaequora et terras delicias nostras fere possumus, et semper hunc locum, in quo primum amavimus, in memoria tenebimus. Nunc etiam, cum sub finem narrationis stamus, hoc epos nostrum imperfectum videtur. Reverti fortasse et emendare, congredi cum pluribus sodalibus, maiorem gloriam ad episci, multum desideramus. Poeta ipse Virgilius, magnos libros Aeneados, haud perfecisse sensit. Forsam solicitudo ab fatis, poetis omnibus decreta est. Alio in modo autem, epos nostrum solum hodie incipit, cum liber Harvardianus finiatur, gloriosissimae pugnae, et terrificissima monstra, et potentissimi amores nos in futuro tempore manent. Epos nostrum Harvardianum multas res gestas continuit, sed proemium tantum erat. Nam tempus etiam nunc restat nobis, in quo opus pulchrum et omnino novum scribere possumus, quo dignum loco erit, apud carmina priscorum. Valete.
Senior English Address, When We Fall in One Piece, candidate for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, August Jennings Rock.
When I was 6 years old, I learned suddenly that the world is a scary place. On a beautiful, crisp, blue sky morning, on my first day of first grade, a cinematic fireball roared out of the World Trade Center and fixed me to the living room window. Our apartment building shook like an earthquake, then the lights went out. The power outage ended Sesame Street early, and with no elevator, my mom and I ran down 22 flights of stairs to my building's lobby. As the first tower fell and the perfect blue sky turned black, I floated away from the only home I had known in a lifeboat going to New Jersey, leaving behind my neighborhood buried in a dusty white avalanche of rubble and debris. When I got to New Jersey, a fireman's deep voice directed me to jump. I made it off the boat and onto the dock without falling into the Hudson River, but I lost my shoes and watched helplessly as they drifted toward the smoky horizon. While I stood there, another firefighter took me by the hand and silently guided me through a hole in a chain-link fence to an office building where my neighbor sought refuge. We looked like ghosts, covered head to toe in debris. The firefighter handed me a hose so I could clean my face and hands. I know now that the firefighter had friends that had just died minutes before. But in that selfless moment, he took my hand and took the time to help me get cleaned up. He showed me what it was like to be strong. I've often wondered if, in some small way, I see the world the way I do today because of that firefighter. Because I witnessed that day that love and courage trump hate and destruction. While my neighborhood collapsed before my eyes, my strongest memory is still of that one firefighter. The story of 9/11 is that 2 planes hit the Twin Towers, but the story for me is that a firefighter held my hand. We, the members of the class of 2017, were first graders on September 11th, 2001. We were high school seniors on April 15th, 2013, when, fresh off of receiving our acceptance letters to Harvard, we would be suddenly sobered by the Boston Marathon bombing. 3 people lost their lives. Many more were seriously injured. 4 days later, Cambridge was on lockdown as law enforcement searched for the remaining suspect. Students holed up in their dorm rooms as police cars patrolled the city. Visitas, the 3-day event that would serve to welcome newly admitted students, was to be hosted that weekend. Some of us had already arrived and spent the day at the airport in limbo, waiting. In the end, Visitas was canceled. However, in the span of just a few hours, Harvard's upperclassmen rallied to create a virtual Visitas and connected to us through our computer screens. Despite disruption and uncertainty, Harvard students rallied to welcome the class of 2017. The story of the 2013 Boston Marathon is that 2 brothers committed an act of terror that killed and injured. But what if the ultimate story was that bystanders ran toward the explosion to save lives? The story of the days that followed is that Cambridge was on lockdown on the weekend that was supposed to have been our Visitas. But what if the ultimate story was that Harvard's upperclassmen cared enough to figure out another way to welcome us to Harvard and to make us feel at home? Graduation day is a celebration, an occasion to lift a glass, to make a toast, to acknowledge accomplishments, and to thank God we made it through exams. But graduation day is also an opportunity for us to set an intention for ourselves that honors the responsibility that comes with a Harvard degree. When the universe shifted on September 11th and again on April 15th, people ran toward the explosion. And when I look at a map and trace my finger up the coast, all the lines and borders on the map run together. And when we fall, we always come down together in one piece. I have learned that the world can be a scary place. But I have also learned that in the face of fear, we have a choice. Who will we choose to be when we are presented with the opportunity to care about, to stand with, to speak up for, to give up something of ourselves as a simple act of humanity? Many of us have gone to bed in fear. Fear of discrimination, fear of deportation, fear of walls and bans and rollbacks. We have been afraid. But among us are the courageous. I know because I've seen it. I've eaten next to it in the dining hall. I've studied across from it in the library. I've walked by it in Harvard Yard. I know the mark of courage, and I've seen it here with you. So, as we walk through those gates one final time as students, let us choose our weapons wisely. Let courage be our defense against cowardice, hope our defense against despair, compassion our defense against destruction. Let's choose love as our ultimate defense against fear. Because in the face of fear lies the golden opportunity to shift the narrative by showing up as someone who is willing to walk a 6-year-old to a safe place through a hole in a chain-link fence. Here, right now, lies the golden opportunity for you, for me, for us to be the ultimate story.
Graduate English Address, How to be Bewildered at Harvard. Candidate for the degree of Master of Theological Studies, Walter Smelt III.
To get into Harvard's Widener Library, you first climb a huge, imposing set of steps. After you do that, and you finally enter our most monumental temple of learning, you see another imposing set of steps. And if you're me, you pause, because you're winded. The whole ordeal feels like an architect's heavy-handed attempt to teach some lesson, like, knowledge is hard. Anyway, once you catch your breath, you climb the second set of steps to find, at the top, a Gutenberg Bible. As you probably know, the Gutenberg Bible is the oldest example of a book made with a printing press, a revolutionary information technology. As you probably don't know, I love books. The most exciting part of coming to Harvard, for me, was getting the library card. because if you love books, this is a good place to be. In fact, I'll tell you how big our collection is here. The librarians aren't even sure how many books we have that are bound in human skin. They think probably just one, but if you don't know how many human-bound books are in your library, you have a lot of books. Of course, I don't just love the physical books, I love what's inside them. In particular, I love literature and sacred texts, like the Gutenberg Bible. So in order to study them, I came to Harvard Divinity School, which turns 200 this year. And I'm glad I did, because it is a magical, kooky place where the people are always friendly and often know a language you've never heard of, and sometimes bump into you because they're doing walking meditation. And no matter what you just said, it reminds someone of a line from the mystical poet Rumi. Of course, every part of this university is special. Students from Harvard College and our various graduate and professional schools routinely become leaders in their fields. Nobel-winning physicists, educators, billionaires, poets, politicians, and on and on. Those books I love, many were written by Harvard grads. And we create not just works of literature, but law books, music books, the account books of Fortune 500 companies. And quite a few former students have had history books written about them. For instance, presidents as politically different from one another as George W. Bush and Barack Obama both hold degrees from this university. Regardless of your own political opinions, I think you'll agree that Harvard graduates have a habit of going on to matter to the world, for good and for ill, often at the same time. And that's where the Divinity School comes in. Because though it sits on the edge of campus, I believe it is the university's moral center. In the chemistry lab and the math department, the goal is to solve problems. In the Divinity School, problems are wrestled with, but they are never vanquished. That's because some problems just come with being human, and they need to be confronted again by each generation. No new technology, no printing press or app is going to settle the problem of greed or death or hate. And at the Divinity School, we think about these problems and about how people have dealt with them through the ages and how to do what right we can in the face of all that's wrong. As it happens, that reminds me of a line from Rumi. Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment. Harvard graduates will change the world, one way or another, because we're clever. But we must be more than that. We must be willing to become bewildered, neither approaching a problem arrogantly, sure that we already know the answer, nor throwing up our hands and walking away. Becoming bewildered means admitting some problems don't have quick fixes. It means learning from our mistakes, learning from the other, learning what it is we can't learn. And those are things Rumi can teach us about. Rumi, an immigrant from what is now Afghanistan to what is now Turkey. An immigrant from the 13th century to our own, a Muslim mystic. Rumi has something immensely valuable to tell us, but we have to listen really hard for it, with humility, and for the rest of our lives. Be proud of what you've accomplished here, but know that it's only the beginning. Earlier, I mentioned the lesson of the Widener steps. Well, after a few years here, I'm sure you'll agree that knowledge is hard. But wisdom is even harder. We'll need both out there, whatever our field of study, because this world is complex and contradictory, and if we aren't bewildered sometimes, we're doing it wrong. But we'll go forth anyway, to change the world and also to be changed by it, to write our own books. Those books may be made of paper or published digitally, or what you leave behind may simply be the legacy of the acts that make up a life. Regardless of their form, your books will be good books if you are willing to be bewildered. If you take on this messy, tragic, lovely world and confront its problems in good faith.
These addresses by selected candidates for ordinary degrees being ended, the deans of the several departments will now present to the President and Fellows and to the Board of Overseers in the favoring presence of the friends here assembled. The candidates on whom the various academic distinctions are with due ceremony to be conferred. The Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences.
Madam President, Fellows of Harvard College, Mr. President, and members of the Board of Overseers. In the name of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences and by its authority, I have the honor to report on 4 groups of candidates who will be presented to you today. First, the Dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences will present candidates for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy and then the degree of Master of Arts. Next, the Dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences will present candidates for the degrees of Master of Science and of Engineering. Third, the Dean of Continuing Education and University Extension will present candidates for the degrees of Associate in Arts, Bachelor of Liberal Arts, and Master of Liberal Arts and Extension Studies. Finally, near the close of these exercises, the seniors in Harvard College, who are candidates for the first degree in arts or in science, will stand proudly before you. The candidates in each of these groups have, by vote of the faculty, fulfilled the requirements for the degrees for which they are severally recommended. I salute all of these individuals, trusting that they will forever wisely enjoy the freedoms that their education has given to them, while bearing the responsibilities that the learning demands of them. Each of these groups will now be introduced to you by the deans responsible for the programs in which they have been enrolled.
Candidates for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy will rise.
The PhD is really the highest honor of the university, the terminal degree. And the Dean of the Graduate School.
The Dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences.
Zhao Ming, a statistician.
Madam President, Fellows of Harvard College, Mr. President, members, Board of Overseers. As the Dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, come on, should I do this again? Thank you for your kindness. To return the favor, I want to double check with each of you if you really, really want this degree. Because many of you may realize this is absolutely your last chance to be a Harvard dropout. So you want the degree?
This is wholly unconventional.
Then let's get over with it. As the Dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, I have the honor to present to you these scholars, all of whom have devoted themselves to the rigorous pursuit of the advanced study, have attained high distinction, and have made original contribution to knowledge in their several fields of scholarship.
By virtue of authority delegated to me and recognizing your high academic achievements, I confer on you the degree of Doctor of Philosophy and welcome you to the ancient and universal company of scholars, and entrust to you, wait, I'm not done, and entrust to you the free inquiry of future generations. Congratulations.
I remember this moment. Welcome to the ancient and universal company of scholars. Many of them have been at this for 6 years, 8 years.
That's right.
You may be seated. Candidates from the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences for the degree of Master of Arts will rise.
Yeah, there's a mixture here of students
the Dean
who have
of
a
the Graduate
master's,
School of Arts and
some
Sciences.
who are getting a master's on the way to the PhD.
Madam President, Fellows of Harvard College, Mr. President, members of Board of Overseers. As the Dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, thank you. But I won't remind you that this is your last chance, because you can't come to the graduate school to a doctoral, then drop out. As the Dean of the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences, I have the honor to present to you these candidates, all of whom have completed commendable steps of advanced study in their respective disciplines.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the degree of Master of Arts and certify that you have surmounted with distinction the first stage of graduate study. Congratulations.
Dean Zhao Li Meng will be on leave this next year, and we'll have Emma Dench as the interim
Candidates
Dean of the Graduate
from
School.
the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences for the degrees of Master of Science and Master of Engineering will rise. The Dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences.
Frank Doyle, our newest school.
Madam President,
He arrived at Harvard 2 years
Fellows
ago.
of Harvard College, Mr. President, and members of the Board of Overseers. As Dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, I have the honor to present to you these degree candidates who have completed the first step of advanced study in engineering and applied sciences. They stand ready to address societal challenges through foundational science with translational impact.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the degree of Master of Science or Master of Engineering and certify that you have surmounted with distinction the first stage of graduate study. Congratulations.
This school has a special orange and gold-colored set of crow's feet on their robes.
That's right, this is the first year that's
Candidates
added.
for the degrees of Associate in Arts, Bachelor of Liberal Arts, and Master of Liberal Arts in Extension Studies will rise. The Dean of Continuing Education and University Extension.
Madam President, Fellows of Harvard College, Mr. President, members of the Board of Overseers. As Dean of Continuing Education and University Extension, I have the honor to present to you these students, candidates for the degrees of Associates in Arts, Bachelors of Liberal Arts, and Masters of Liberal Arts in Extension Studies.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the degree of Associate in Arts, Bachelor of Liberal Arts, or Master of Liberal Arts in Extension Studies, and admit you to the Fellowship of Educated Persons. Congratulations.
Admitted to the Fellowship of Educated Persons, and the Extension School is one of Harvard's real prizes.
Gems, yes. I gave the commencement address 2 years ago at the Extension ceremony, and it's really an incredible group of people of all ages.
Psalm 79, again traditional.
the Dean of the Faculty of Medicine.
Madam President, Fellows of Harvard College, Mr. President, members of the Board of Overseers. In the name of the Faculty of Medicine and by its authority, it's my honor today to report that 2 groups of candidates in the fields of medicine and dental medicine have fulfilled the requirements of the faculty for the degrees for which they are recommended. They will be presented by the deans responsible for the programs in which they are enrolled.
George Daly has a
Candidates
son
for the
who's-
degrees of Doctor of Dental Medicine, Doctor of Medical Sciences, and Master of Medical Sciences will rise. The Dean of the School of Dental Medicine.
Madam President, Fellows of Harvard College, Mr. President, members of the Board of Overseers. As Dean of the School of Dental Medicine, I have the honor to present to you these degree candidates, each of whom has devoted 4 years to the study of dental medicine, or at least 3 years to postdoctoral studies aimed at improving health and the quality of life.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the degree of Doctor of Dental Medicine, Doctor of Medical Sciences, or Master of Medical Sciences, and declare that you are qualified for practice and research in a demanding branch of medicine. Congratulations.
That was Dean Donoff of the School of Medicine, Dental Medicine.
Candidates for the degrees of Doctor of Medicine and Master of Medical Science will rise.
Here are the brand new MDs.
The Dean for Medical Education.
Edward Hundert, the
Madam
Dean for
President,
Medical
Fellows
Education.
of Harvard College, Mr. President, members of the Board of Overseers. As Dean for Medical Education, I have the honor to present to you these degree candidates who have dedicated themselves to the relief of human suffering and prepared themselves well for a life of learning and service in medicine.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the degree of Doctor of Medicine or Master of Medical Science, and declare that as physicians, you are ready to engage in an honorable and merciful calling. Congratulations.
Candidates for the degree of Master of Theological Studies, Master of Divinity, Master of Theology, and Doctor of Theology will rise. The Dean of the Faculty of Divinity.
Madam President, Fellows of Harvard College, Mr. President, members of the Board of Overseers. As Dean of the Faculty of Divinity, in this our bicentennial year, I have the honor to present to you these degree candidates, each of whom has devoted 2, 3, or more years to theological and religious studies in preparation for careers as leaders in scholarship and vocations of service.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the degree of Master of Theological Studies, Master of Divinity, Master of Theology, or Doctor of Theology, and declare that you are well prepared to foster the health and vitality of communities of faith, to further scholarship in religious studies, and to help in shaping the shared values of the broader community. Congratulations.
Candidates for the degrees of Doctor of Law, Master of Laws, and Doctor of Juridical Science will rise. With deep appreciation for her 8 years of leadership of Harvard Law School, I recognize the Dean of the Faculty of Law.
Thank you. Madam President, Fellows of Harvard College, Mr. President, and members of the Board of Overseers. As Dean of the Faculty of Law, I have the distinct honor to present to you this bicentennial class of extraordinary and diverse individuals, each of whom has completed a degree in legal studies toward the end of advancing justice and promoting the rule of law.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the degree of Doctor of Law, Master of Laws, or Doctor of Juridical Science, and declare that you are ready. You are ready, you're very ready, obviously, to aid in the shaping and application of those wise restraints that make us free. Congratulations.
Candidates for the degrees of Master in Business Administration and Doctor of Business Administration have risen. The Dean of the Faculty of Business Administration,
Dean Nitin-Noria.
Madam President, Fellows of Harvard Corporation, Mr. President, and members of the Board of Overseers. As Dean of the Faculty of Business, it is my great honor to present to you these degree candidates who have mastered the study of business administration and prepared themselves to become leaders who will make a difference in the world.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the degree of Master in Business Administration or Doctor of Business Administration, and testify that you are ready to lead people and organizations in enterprises that will serve society. Congratulations.
Nitin Noria, Dean, perhaps the first, from India. the Hindu background.
Madam President,
and
at the
very
risk of
effective in
upending all
internationalizing.
Harvard tradition,
Actually, I think
as a proud parent, I would also like to give a shout out
Was
to
he?
my daughter Reva
Did
Noor.
he?
Class of
Venki at,
2017, Harvard College.
School of Engineering.
But yes, Nitin is a wonderful man.
Candidates for the several degrees in architecture, landscape architecture, urban planning, and design will rise. The Dean of the Faculty of Design.
And here again, a sense of the international dimensions of Harvard administration, Mohsen Mostafavi.
Mr. President, members of the Board of Overseers. As Dean of the Faculty of Design, I have the honor to present to you these students, each of whom has qualified for a master's degree in architecture, landscape architecture, urban design, urban planning, or design studies, or for the degree of Doctor of Design.
Mohsen Mostafavi, probably the first Iranian dean.
Probably.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the degree for which you have qualified and declare your competence to lead in shaping the spaces in which we live. Congratulations.
So they're the ones with the Legos on, bits of Lego on their
Candidates for the several degrees in public health will rise.
And we have our new Dean of Public Health, Michelle Williams.
The Dean of the Faculty of Public Health.
Dear Madam President, Fellows of Harvard College, Mr. President, and members of the Board of Overseers, as a freshman dean of the Faculty of Public Health, I have the great honor to present to you these students, each of whom have qualified for a master's degree or a doctor's degree to provide leadership, advance knowledge, and improve public's health.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the degrees in public health for which your studies have qualified you, and declare that you are well prepared to generate and utilize knowledge to improve health throughout the world. Congratulations.
Candidates for the degrees of Doctor of Education,
they're holding up books. Looks like children's books.
They're holding up children's books.
Doctor of Education Leadership, and Master of Education will rise.
They are making even more noise than the law school or the business school. The education ed school really has a lot of spirit.
The Dean of the Faculty of Education.
This is Jim Ryan, Dean for the past few years there.
Madam President, Fellows of Harvard College, Mr. President, and members of the Board of Overseers. Okay. As Dean of the Faculty of Education, I have the honor to present to you these degree candidates who will change the world through education.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the master's or doctor's degree in education and declare that you are well prepared to advance learning to change the world. Congratulations.
One more professional school before
Candidates
the college.
for the degrees of Master in Public Administration, Master in Public Administration in International Development.
These are the Kennedy School students holding the globes, destined for careers in public service.
One more degree to go, guys. And Master in Public Policy will rise. The Dean of the Faculty of Government.
This is Doug Elmendorf, former head of the Congressional Budget Office.
Madam President, Fellows of Harvard College, Mr. President, and members of the Board of Overseers. As Dean of the Faculty of Government, I have the great honor to present to you these degree candidates, each of whom has qualified to provide leadership in public service.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the degree for which your studies have qualified you, and testify that you are well prepared to offer leadership in the quest for enlightened public policy and effective public service throughout the world. Congratulations.
And now it's time for the undergraduates.
But first, the world premiere of To the River Charles by Michael Chapter.
Candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Arts or of Science will rise.
Here they are, some 1,600 of them.
And of course, the summa cum laude graduates gather near. Among them is a young woman named Wynne Graham, who is summa, and she is the daughter of a former Rhodes Scholar from Harvard, Lisa Muscatine, who's in the class of 1976.
Their chosen representatives, together with candidates for those degrees summa cum laude, will draw near.
Their chosen representatives are the members of the class marshals.
The Dean of Harvard College.
And of course, the summas.
And Drew Faust will actually go and greet some of the summas and shake their hands.
Madam President, fellows of Harvard College, Mr. President, and members of the Board of Overseers. As Dean of Harvard College, I have the honor to present to you these students, each of whom has fulfilled the faculty's requirements for the first degree in arts or in science. Each candidate stands ready to advance knowledge, to promote understanding, and to serve society.
By virtue of authority delegated to me, I confer on you the first degree in arts or in science and admit you to the fellowship of educated persons. Congratulations.
And she now leaves that chair for the first time to come and greet and shake hands with some of those who have graduated.
She will get to greet some of those honored seniors.
The number
I guess
of
seniors
summa,
no more. Now they are alumni.
The number of summa cum laude students is limited in each class and voted by the faculty just this past Monday afternoon.
They really have to have extreme achievement.
Both by their department through a summa thesis and certainly by their overall grade point average. The top scholars in this class, there were 7 of them given that top scholar award, had a grade point average of 4.0 all the way through.
By virtue of authority now delegated to me by the 2 governing boards, I now confer the following honorary degrees. The provost will introduce the candidates.
She has been called equal parts Mother Teresa and Rambo. One of Somalia's most revered figures, she embodies a rare combination of compassion and courage in the face of danger and despair. As a child in Mogadishu, she watched her pregnant mother die before her eyes, and she resolved to become a physician. Living in poverty, left to raise 4 sisters, she won a scholarship to study medicine in Kiev. She later returned to her homeland, obtained a law degree, and in 1983 founded a 1-room health clinic outside Mogadishu. Within a decade, chaos came to Somalia. As her country was ravaged by civil war, drought, famine, and disease, her small clinic grew into a sprawling village, a refuge for tens of thousands of people seeking safety, sustenance, and a semblance of order in a disordered world. The village came to bear her name, and in time, it became a target for militants determined to spread violence and fear. She defied their demands. She withstood their attacks, Faced with continuing threats, she carried on. As Somalis continue to suffer, her village continues to offer a haven for people in desperate need. She insists that the villagers obey a simple rule. To live there, you are simply a Somali, not a member of a clan. With her 2 daughters, both doctors, she still works tirelessly to call the world's attention to her country's plight and to provide tens of thousands of Somalis with shelter and health care, food and education, peace and hope. With deep admiration, we honor Dr. Hawa Abdi.
Hawa Abdi, extraordinary woman and someone who has made an enormous difference in Somalia. She is attended in the back by Jennifer Leaning, who is from the School of Public Health, head of the FXB Center for
Confronting
Human Rights.
the ravages of war and famine, offering succor to those in dire need. She fearlessly faces the forces of darkness and keeps aflame the light of hope. Hawa Abdi Dublawe, Doctor of Laws.
Some careers are so remarkably full and varied that it's hard to believe that they're the work of a single individual. So it is with our next distinguished guest, a native of Hattiesburg, Mississippi, who grew up deep in the segregated South and whose early promise in mathematics led him to college straight from the 10th grade. Professor of Physics and Dean of the College at Brown, founding director of the Inner City Teachers of Science program, Vice President for Research at the University of Chicago, co-founder of the National Society of Black Physicists, director of the Argonne National Laboratory, director of the National Science Foundation, president of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, occupant of the exalted position of provost at the University of California, president for 12 fruitful years of his alma mater, Morehouse College, whose Center for Leadership now bears his name, chair of the Bank of America, chair of the Giant Magellan Telescope Project, and a testament to his leadership well beyond the sciences, president and now chancellor of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. We physicists like to believe we can do damn near anything, he once said. A fitting observation from a physicist who has done just that. He is especially admired for his deep dedication to promoting scientific literacy and innovative education, to advancing the art of mentoring, to easing the path from discovery to invention, and to creating opportunities for the underrepresented. We proudly honor Walter Massey.
Really an extraordinary career, from mathematics in the South to the administrative roles in the University of Chicago, Brown, Morehouse.
Traversing 2 cultures as an academic leader, advancing useful knowledge as a citizen of science, a splendid mentor always poised to open doors for others, a model man of Morehouse, steadfast, honest, and true. Walter E. Massey, Doctor of Laws.
Few academic disciplines have shaped our times more than computer science. And few individuals have shaped computer science more than the Harvard colleague we honor next. The son of a rabbi, he moved with his family from Nazi Germany to Palestine as a child. One day, at age 11, he found himself in the company of older boys struggling with a geometry problem. They couldn't solve it. He did. His early love of mathematics led him to Princeton for a PhD and then to IBM. There, he co-wrote a paper on the subject of finite automata. The paper was a crucial early step in the specification and design of computer systems, and a key to his earning the most prestigious prize in computer science, the Turing Award. Over his long career, he has made many foundational contributions to his field. He has explored the limits of what can and cannot be computed. He has created software that is used to spread information across parallel computer arrays and networks. He has pioneered the study of randomized algorithms, including the test of whether a number is prime. He has done much to shape the modern field of cryptography, the basis of secure communication in the internet age. And as a member of the Harvard faculty since 1981, he has had a huge influence on the development of computer science at this university and around the world. We proudly welcome Harvard's Thomas J. Watson Senior Research Professor of Computer Science and the Albert Einstein Professor Emeritus of Mathematics and Computer Science at his alma mater, the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Michael Rabin.
Prime aficionado of algorithms and automata, high-capacity hard drive of Harvard Computer Science, whose impact is as incalculable as his crypto systems are uncrackable. Michael O. Rabin, Doctor of Science.
At age 5, at her Quaker school in York, England, she made her stage debut in the featured role of a snail. At the time, the London theater critics took little notice of the improvisational slithering that distinguished her early debut. But by her early 20s, the theater world had found in her a radiant new star. And by 2010, a public poll in Britain named her the greatest stage actor of all time. On both stage and screen, she has brought to life an infinite variety of roles, from Ophelia to Iris Murdoch, from Cabaret's Sally Bowles to Cleopatra, from Lady Bracknell to Lady Macbeth, from Titania, Queen of the Fairies, To Elizabeth and Victoria, Queens of England. From the fair Juliet, Romeo's beloved, to the formidable M, the boss of James Bond. She has won 8 Olivier Awards for outstanding acting on the British stage, more than anyone ever. She has won 10 awards from the British Academy of Film and Television Arts, 6 for the big screen, 4 for the small. As one colleague writes, "The wretched woman has no faults, either personally or professionally." I marvel at the subtlety and in some ways the simplicity of her acting. What she does seems to be the right thing, and the only thing to do at the moment she does it. On her wrist, she sports a birthday gift from her daughter, a tattoo with the words Carpe Diem. Throughout her ascent from mollusk to majesty, she has continued to seize each day and to seize the rapt attention of reverent audiences on both sides of the Atlantic. We join them in applauding Dame Judi Dench.
So wonderful to see her face as that was read out. Delighted.
Extraordinary actress.
And they didn't mention the Best Exotic Marigold Hotel, which was my most recent favorite.
With fair Titania's powers of enchantment and Cleopatra's plenitude of charms, a venerated queen of screen and theater with whom we feel a fond familial bond. Judith Olivia Dench, Doctor of Arts.
I think she might be accompanied by her daughter, who is on the faculty here.
As a young Eagle Scout growing up in Denver, he dreamed of becoming a forest ranger. But, urged on by a high school teacher, he moved east to attend what is still widely regarded as our greatest institution of higher learning, at least among universities located just a few miles west of the New Jersey Turnpike. With his pair of Princeton degrees, he built a career as one of his generation's most successful executives, rising to become the influential chairman and CEO of Lockheed Martin, a global leader in aerospace and technology. A veteran of 2 stints in the Pentagon, he has been a strong exponent of public service in the national interest. Long a prominent figure in policy circles, he has been called the most influential non-scientist in U.S. science. As chair of federal councils and committees, he has played a leading role in shaping the U.S. space program. As chair of a National Academies Commission that produced the landmark report, Rising Above the Gathering Storm, he has forcefully urged support for basic science research as a wellspring of innovation and prosperity. As a trustee at Princeton, MIT, the University of Maryland, and Johns Hopkins, he has been a staunch advocate for higher education. Past chair of the American Red Cross, author of 4 books, and an avid outdoorsman who has ventured to both the North and South Poles, he has received the Defense Department's highest civilian honor 5 times, as well as the National Medal of Technology. We honor Norman Augustine.
Norm Augustine, really a giant champion of science and technology, that Augustine report really still a great
Energized
manifesto
by the
on
promise of the
science and
endless
technology
frontier,
funding.
devoted to science in the nation's service, a tiger of industry with a zest for adventure, be it ideas or rockets, he has an eye for what will fly. Norman R. Augustine, Doctor of Laws.
He's also been to both the North and South Pole, I learned last night.
In introducing our next guest, celebrated composer of music scores and conductor laureate of the Boston Pops, music seems more fitting than words.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
Great a cappella groups performing this medley of the great tunes of John Williams.
We honor the maestro who has written music for more than 100 movies, who has been nominated for more Academy Awards than any living being, terrestrial or extra, and whom his collaborator Steven Spielberg calls one of the great storytellers of all time, John Williams.
Not only in Boston, but around the country, heralded for the years he spent at the Boston Pops as well.
The Superman of music for the movies, whose scores of scores propel great stories skyward. His melodies dwell deep inside our memories. His harmonies induce our hearts to soar. John Towner Williams, Doctor of Music.
When she was 4, she figured out that writing poems and then reciting them for her mother had the happy result of postponing her bedtime. She still thinks back fondly on her earliest opus. Zip, zip through the air comes a fearful bear. His name is Lightning, and when he comes, you can see the whole sky brightening. How apposite today. From her early fascination with words sprang a lifelong love of literature and a career as a groundbreaking literary critic and distinguished poet and essayist. Her 1979 book, The Mad Woman in the Attic, co-written with Susan Gubar, has been called a stunning moment for literary criticism. As one reviewer said, it offered a bold new interpretation of the great 19th century women novelists, presenting the first pervasive case for the existence of a distinctly female imagination. She and her longtime collaborator then co-wrote the landmark 3-volume series, No Man's Land, exploring the work of 20th century women writers and producing another classic of feminist literary studies. She is not just a pioneering critic, but also an award-winning poet, acclaimed for poems that, as one colleague put it, are beautifully situated at the intersection of craft and feeling. She has also written with extraordinary insight about death and the ways we grieve. Her book, Death's Door, a richly textured contemplation of mortality, has been called a superb achievement that carries us gently but powerfully toward understanding. We honor one of the leading literary critics of her generation, distinguished Professor Emerita at the University of California, Davis, Sandra Gilbert.
really the pioneer of feminist literary criticism. Anyone who is of my generation look to her as really the pioneer.
Casting novel light where shadows shrouded women's writing, crafting poignant poems that both inspirit and enlighten. A pioneer of feminist studies for whom the personal is the political as well as the poetical. Sandra Mortola Gilbert, Doctor of Laws.
Our next guest grew up in Beirut during what she calls its most wonderful days. She wanted to study Shakespeare, but her mother urged science instead. She studied biology at the American University in Beirut, then started medical school there. Soon, civil war engulfed the city. Bombs fell all around. Her house was damaged. Her brother was injured by shrapnel. She went to live with relatives in Texas, hoping to return home soon, but the war in Lebanon worsened. She moved to Nashville and finished her studies at Meharry Medical College. Having returned to Texas, now at Baylor, she planned to become a pediatric cardiologist, but she grew fascinated by neurology. By chance, within 2 weeks, she saw 2 young patients with a devastating yet poorly understood disease called Rett syndrome, which she'd read about only recently. Moved by the plight of these 2 young girls, she plunged into research. Before long, she became a leading expert on the degenerative disorder known as spinocerebellar ataxia type 1. She went on to discover the elusive gene associated with Rett syndrome, and she built a career as a preeminent authority on the genetic causes and biological mechanisms of neurological diseases. Her work holds promise to advance understanding of autism, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and other diseases of the central nervous system. And it has had a wider impact on ailments from hearing loss to colon cancer. Recipient of an alphabet of honors in science and medicine, she is at once an illustrious investigator, educator, and mentor. We honor, from Baylor College of Medicine and the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, Huda Zogby.
From dauntless young woman who never lost nerve to eminent expert on the nervous system's workings, she patiently translates the language of life so that patients might realize the promise of life. Huda Y. Zogby, Doctor of Science.
Wonderfully distinguished neurologist.
He has faced down virulent racism while boxing his way to the heavyweight title. He has rendered heroic service in the Venetian army, then succumbed to the treachery of Iago. He has experienced the glory of baseball stardom and the travails of a hard life that followed. He has sought to lure Luke Skywalker to the dark side, and then slain an emperor to rescue his son. As a humble priest, he has strived to rebuild the South African village in the era of apartheid. And as a humble chauffeur, he has driven Miss Daisy in the days of Jim Crow. As the noble Jaffe Joffer, father of Prince Hakim, he has ruled as king of Zamunda. And as the noble Mufasa, father of Simba, he has ruled as king of the jungle. The National Medal of Arts, lifetime awards from both the Screen Actors Guild and the American Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, a Tony Award for lifetime achievement soon to come. And that voice, resonant and deep and utterly unmistakable. All this after overcoming a severe stutter as a child, which for years often left him mute. Born in rural Mississippi, raised in Michigan, initially a pre-med in college, an Army veteran, he was a night janitor in off-Broadway theaters before emerging as one of America's most accomplished and admired actors on both stage and screen. We salute the great James Earl Jones.
Accompanied by his faculty escort, the director of the ART, behind him to the right.
Just 2 months ago, he appeared at the ART stage in Tennessee Williams' play, Night of the
An
Iguana.
actor of inimitable power, whose roles bespeak his singular resources. When he a round, unvarnished tale delivers, there's never any doubt with whom the force is. James Earl Jones, Doctor of Arts.
Having already welcomed an iconic voice and a composer of music from the land of the Jedi, far, far away, today, on the 40th anniversary of the opening of Star Wars, we recognize one of the most accomplished people ever to have celebrated a Star Wars-themed bar mitzvah.
Who was his escort?
It was clear from childhood that the Force is strong with this one. Even before he turned 13, he created Zucknet, a home computer network designed for his father's dental office in Dobbs Ferry, New York. He wasn't your ordinary teenager. He was fascinated by ancient Greek and Latin. He was the pride of his school's fencing team. But beyond that, there was his eye-opening ability to code. That and his uncanny foresight in seeing that people wanted computers to connect them not just with other computers, but with other people. He came to Harvard as a freshman nearly 15 years ago in the fall of 2002. As a sophomore, he moved into Kirkland House. There he launched the forerunner. There he launched the forerunner of what has grown into the most far-reaching social network on the planet. He left college for Silicon Valley. He dropped the from the Facebook. He combined his technical prowess, his entrepreneurial savvy, and his instincts about social behavior to build Facebook into a global phenomenon, something that is now used by 1.94 billion people worldwide on a regular basis. It is with the greatest of pride, having confirmed that his bills are fully paid, that we welcome back Mark Zuckerberg to at last earn his Harvard degree.
Remarkably young for this crowd, and yet amazingly accomplished.
Genitor Maximus Libre Facierum. From a whiteboard in Kirkland House to one hacker way. He has forged a transformation through the power of connection and set his sights on how bold new ideas can serve the world. Mark Elliott Zuckerberg, Doctor of Laws.
His first Harvard degree, the Doctor of Law.
In the name of this Society of Scholars, I declare that these persons are entitled to the rights and privileges pertaining to their several degrees, and that their names are to be forever borne on its roll of honorary members.
Degree candidates and their guests and all alumni are warmly invited to attend the afternoon session of Commencement Day exercises under the direction of the Harvard Alumni Association. The alumni procession will begin at 1:45 p.m. and the exercises will begin at 2:30 p.m. The commencement speakers will be Mr. Mark Elliott Zuckerberg and the president of Harvard University. Now, the commencement choir director will lead us in the singing of the commencement hymn. Following the hymn, the Pusey minister will pronounce the benediction. The commencement exercises then being ended, the sheriff of Middlesex County will declare the meeting adjourned. The audience is requested to remain seated until the president and fellows and their guests have withdrawn from the platform.
Life is short, and time is filled with swift transition. Thus, we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who travel along life's journey with us. Thus, be swift to love. Make haste to be kind. Be quick to compliment and slow to criticize. And remember, never speak a word of judgment without first speaking a word of grace. And if we do these things, we will begin to approximate what it means to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before our God. And most importantly, class of 2017, we say to you on this day,
may the force be with you.
That great bass voice of James Earl Jones.
Recognizable anywhere. And here comes the High Sheriff of Middlesex County to end the ceremony.
As the High Sheriff of Middlesex County, I declare that the meeting will be adjourned.
And now the bells.
The bells from across Cambridge, all the way to the 17 wonderful bells of the Lowell Tower Bell Tower that will actually be silent for the next 2 years during our renovation. And a wonderful, wonderful commencement.
Wonderful commencement despite the weather. The recession begins. Members of the corporation and the overseers, and then the deans and the faculty will slowly come off stage, retreat for a little bite of lunch, and then return for the afternoon exercises.
I think some of the things that our commencement speakers said are worth remembering at this point. I go back to the Latin oration. She said, even now we stand not at the end of the story, that's work seems unfinished, just as Virgil's Aeneas was unfinished, and we need to go and finish our lives. This is just the beginning. And then we had that wonderful address by the young undergraduate who had begun her 6-year-old life in first grade at the time of the marathon of the bombing of the World Trade Center.
There's Judy Dench with her and Walter Massey, both heading off from their honorary degree.
She said, as we walk through these gates, let's choose our weapons wisely, hope and courage and love in the face of fear. And what wonderful examples these honorands have given these graduates today, whether they're from the class of 2017 or in the graduate schools. And the graduate address from the Divinity School urging people to enter into this messy and tragic and lovely world and make a difference.
And let's not forget, as we head off, to remember to ourselves be a little bewildered.
Be a little bewildered, absolutely.
We live in interesting times, and we can, each of us, make a big difference. And let's support all of these new graduates who are going to have such a profound impact on the world, especially when they approach it with some curiosity and bewilderment.
And your work in the Center for Environmental Studies, absolutely critical.
Well, it's a wonderful community we are in, and we're so fortunate to be here.
It certainly is.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And for those of you at home, goodbye.